Welcome back to my booktube channel. My name is Sukaja, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the 5 books that I read in Jan. January was a great reading month for me, and I was able to kickstart the year on a high note by reading 5 books, and I feel like I'm on a roll. Let's get down to talking about the 5 books I read in Jan 2021. So the first of the 5 books was a book about Muslim life and culture in the United States. So the very first book is A Woman Is No Man by Ita Frum. This book is about a woman growing up in Palestine and how she eventually gets married and moves to Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, she lives with her husband and his mom. She lives her life completely indoors, even though she's traveled to a new country and one that is far more developed than her old one. She still ends up living indoors the entire time, and it's very claustrophobic, her existence. So it's kind of like the TV show Unorthodox, if any of y'all have watched it, how certain communities can be very backward. Of course, a lot of people have said that this is not how it is everywhere in Muslim culture. This book is a bit of an extreme take on things, but I personally felt that it was a necessary read, and it is the author's part truth for all we know. It's basically about this girl Isra who grows up in Palestine loving books. There's an arranged marriage that happens, and then she moves to Brooklyn with her new husband who she barely knows. And then she ends up having a lot of children. So basically it's about life of suppressed women living within a system and how the system strives to oppress women, and it's really hard to navigate things when you're in the system and to fight power. But Isra tries her best. And then the story moves on to when Isra has a child, and that child goes through very similar things. I have to put a disclaimer here saying that this book has a lot of domestic violence and graphic scenes, so I wouldn't recommend if you are a person with a faint heart to read this book. But if you're curious about certain communities and cultures and identity, also if you want to read a very female-centric story and one that captures the struggle of women when they don't have an educational background and when they have to fight the system, what that feels like, then I recommend you read A Woman Is No Man. Of course, it might frustrate you at times, like it did me. You can sense the helplessness of the character. If that feels like it's your cup of tea, then you should definitely read it. When it comes to the writing, it was quite simple, and you do learn a few things about Muslim culture and stuff. Like there are certain words from Arabic used. This is just probably 3 stars. But if you guys are interested in a book that deals with lives of Palestinian women, a book that gives you a glimpse into what happens behind closed doors and how nobody can really be, absolutely sure of what's going on in someone else's life just by knowing them externally. It's really hard to penetrate the internal unit that a family is. It's really hard to understand family dynamics from the outside. So that is what this book is sort of about. I continued reading Muslim literature because I felt like reading more stories along the same lines. So that took me to My Past is a Foreign Country by Zeba Talkani. I will link another video where I extensively talk about this book over here, so you can check that out. I really enjoyed this. This is a 4 out of 5 star read for me. This book is about a girl who goes in the pursuit of knowledge. She lives in Saudi Arabia. She's a Muslim girl. This is mainly an autobiographical work, so you learn details about her own life. Zeba is somebody who struggles with alopecia, which is hair loss, at a very young age. So that takes a toll on her confidence, and as a teenager, it becomes very challenging for her to deal with all of that. But she learns to navigate that successfully along the course of the years, and education empowers her and gives her the ability to take her career and her life in her own hands. So it's a very inspiring read, and it's very accessible. It's written in simple language. It takes us into different countries and different places, from Manipal and Sirsi, Honavar in India, South India. It also takes us to Saudi Arabia and then Germany and England. So Zeba is somebody who does not settle for less. She's very ambitious. So she is successful at entering the publishing industry in the United Kingdom, where she currently has a job and lives there as well. This book talks about her experiences going through microaggressions as she was in different countries, her experiences meeting people from different cultures, and how education basically empowered her, and how different things helped shape her personality all the way growing up. It's a very relatable read. Therefore, I recommend you to read this because it also is about somebody who studies literature and is very artsy by nature. There are a lot of references here to other texts, and you might really enjoy that. Her ideas about different texts are put forth, and that's really interesting. I recommend reading this. The next book that I read is Shuggie, Bain by Douglas Stuart. Shuggie Bain is a book that has been shortlisted for the Booker Prize 2020. I was glad that I finally picked it up this time. It's a very intense read and it has a lot of bits and parts where you might feel like cringing or you might feel like nauseous because there are things about alcoholism that are described in there that are quite depressing. At the heart of the story is the story of Douglas Stuart probably growing up. It's partly autobiographical. This is about a boy named Shuggie who grows up with his mom and his sister, elder sister, and his elder brother. He's the smallest of 3 children and they all grow up in Scotland, Glasgow. You see a side of Glasgow that people today would not have seen. It is one that involves tenements and council housing, and really poor sections of society live there. Mine workers and their families. Shuggie's mom goes through a lot. Having previously divorced her first husband, she is really not in a good place. So she has to take care of Shuggie, who is still very young when all of this happens. But what is touching is this complicated relationship that develops between Shuggie and his mom. Even though his mom is not really doing her best as a mom, there's still a lot of feeling that Shuggie has, a lot of respect, a lot of love, and that translates through the pages, and it is written really beautifully. This helplessness and hopelessness is definitely conveyed and you really empathize with the characters. You sometimes get frustrated at Agnes, who is Shuggie's mom, and you really feel like giving her a shake, but it's not that easy, especially when people have already chosen a path that they want to traverse, and once they've set their minds to do something, it is really hard to change the course of their lives, especially for a child to do that, and he attempts to do it, and that's marvelous. It talks about what it's like to be on the other side of things, to be a poor person in Scotland and the struggles. There are a lot of references to bodily functions and fluids and liquids that emanate from the orifices of the body. All of that, he uses those devices in his writing to bring about the state of hopelessness and depressed state of existence that he's trying to convey. So it really is a visceral read. It really makes you feel everything and imagine things, and a lot of description in there. So it's really well written. If that's something you think is your cup of tea, then definitely you should pick it up. It was quite a page turner, and I felt like I was watching what was going on within this little family who was living in a very closed environment. I could hear the voices of the people talking about the rumors about this woman and how society can be really unforgiving to somebody who doesn't exist according to its norms. And if you choose to lead a different path, then the people in society, they obviously don't support you. So you're pretty much running your own battle. And I think a lot of merits to all the characters, some of the characters here, especially Agnes, and the way in which you grow to respect this person who is initially someone who frustrates you. But it's amazing how the author succeeds in making the reader emote so much, make the reader feel different things about the same character throughout the narrative. So I think that was done well. And the next book I read this year was Territory of Light by Yuko. This is about a single mother in Tokyo. It is written in 1970s in Japan, and this book was initially published as a series of stories that were printed in the newspaper. So the structure of the novel is slightly unconventional in that each of the stories are very self-contained, and they still tell a conclusive story about this woman navigating life as a single parent who is on the verge of divorcing her husband and is living separately from him, along with her young daughter who is barely 3 years old. So it's about this mother and daughter and how they make their day-to-day existence bearable, and it's a very ahead of its time sort of book, because you wouldn't expect someone in the 1970s in Japan to write about a single woman who has a job and is also a mother and is able to balance all of that. But at the same time, she's human, she's flawed, and you can see that it frustrates her sometimes, and she even has this feeling where she feels like being spiteful towards her daughter. You see her going through a flurry of emotions on a daily basis, and you sort of empathize with that. And it's also about the challenges of being a single parent. And Yushima is somebody who writes autofiction. This is the sort of book that's very slow paced, and it might not be everyone's cup of tea. There are different snippets, and I love the way light is used in every single serialized chapter. It's like this overarching theme that's there in the book. You see descriptions of light in the house that she tries to rent, the first flat that she decides to live in. Descriptions of light are fantastic. Some of the lines are really beautiful as well. If you're somebody who's looking out for that kind of slow storytelling, it doesn't have a very tight plot either, but it still gives you a nice glimpse into the life of a single mom and the different emotions that permeate her day and all of that. So that is a book that I read this month. And finally, I also read This Green and Pleasant Land by Alisha Malik, and this book was also a 4 out of 5 star read, simply because it is something with a very unique premise. If you are curious about the lives of Muslims who are Pakistani and born and brought up in England, and how they navigate their day-to-day lives, being a person of color and coexisting in a society that sort of forces them to assimilate to an extent. Then this is a very interesting book that's very eye-opening, and it doesn't hesitate to discuss certain big issues which a lot of novelists, I think, shy from, especially in fiction. This book is about Bilal, and he is someone who successfully assimilated in this small village in Britain where everyone treats him as one of them, and he's also like an important community member. And one day his mom is on her deathbed and she makes this dying request to him saying that, "Beta, can you build a mosque here? Because I would really like for you to do that." So he agrees, and even though he's hesitant at first, once his mom passes away, the idea keeps coming back to him, and the guilt that he feels at having lost his mom and the grief that he feels about it makes him want to act on this last request of hers. So he suggests to the council that why not build a mosque here, because we might not have too many Muslims, but it'll be a really nice thing to have a mosque. So there are arguments that are laid out, and the whole community comes to take a vote. Suddenly the community starts to perceive him in a different way. Everyone who initially loved Bilal suddenly ends up thinking twice. Then he realizes who his real friends in the community are. I found this book really fast-paced and very interesting. It had good arguments, and also it had some humor in it, so it was very enjoyable and entertaining at the same time. I feel like this is the sort of book I would like to see being adapted onto the screen. I really liked the characters in the book, especially Kala Rukhsana, who is a very lovable character, and she's a very giving person. She is actually Bilal's aunt, even though she's somebody whom people aren't comfortable looking at because she dresses in salwar kameez all the time and walks around in the lawns and people's backyards. Still, the community begins to accept her and appreciates the goodness in her as a person, which is, I think, a fundamental thing when it comes to breaking down the barriers of racism. Everyone needs to sort of view the person objectively and hear what they have to say without making snap judgments based on their skin, color, etc. So I really like the way this book dealt with all of this, and I highly recommend reading it. You have to read There's Green and Pleasant Land because you get curious. You want to know what the eventual conclusion is, whether Bilal is successful at building a mosque or not, and this keeps you going. And the characters in this book are really interesting. They're all very well-rounded and they add to the story, and you can see I'm getting excited just by talking about this book, so highly recommend reading that. And I think out of the 5 books, this was by far my favorite. Hope you found all these books interesting and hope you're inspired to read some of them. Let me know in the comment section if you've read any of these already. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon if you'd like to be alerted each time I post a video. I will be back soon with more bookish content. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sane, and I will see you soon. Bye!